Can you share what it's like to be a woman in the Gun Lake tribe?
Yes. You know, my niece has asked some very important questions that need to be asked in this time, in this day, and in this age. And what it is to be Ikwe, a woman. To me, that word defines us with sacred power and responsibility. The most important thing is that as Ikwewak, as women, we were gifted with the sacred gift of creation. And as Ikwewak, we have a responsibility to that gift. And all nations of creation share in that responsibility. We have Beneshi Shak, the bird nation. We have Gegusak, the fish. We have Wiasak, the four-leggeds. We even have Ojisak, the little insects, the winged ones. And they share in that responsibility and that that they create, and that teaching that life is our responsibility. And in that role of responsibility, we have an obligation to keep this vessel as sacred as possible, meaning that we provide the space with good rest. We provide the space with good nijum, with good food, our sacred traditional foods, Odemanuk, mandaman, corn, the spirit of corn, menoman, the good seed, you know, the one that led us to this Great Lakes area, that we hold those forms of life and life-giving source as well, that we are responsible for those as Ikwewak, as women as well. So we need to share in that responsibility of gardening and finding those things that make the spirit, this vessel, most content in this place that we call Mashkakiaki, the earth, the great earth medicine mother. And how we refer to as Gitaganing, the garden place where our creation stories tell us that everything that we needed was here at our disposal. But we still have a responsibility as women to uphold that part of creation. So, you know, being that source of sacred responsibility and power, you know, that's what I'm trying to instill in my niece today, my granddaughters, my daughters, those that I hold close, that I call little sisters, looking for mentorship or some sort of guidance and the responsibility that we carry. Also that we house this vessel in a responsible way, meaning that, you know, we dress in our skirts, you know, that same covering that denotes this doorway as a sacred place. And that's part of the teachings of our Odemanuk, our strawberry moon, where we put our young women to learn these things about the skirt, learn about their power, learn about their responsibility, learn about finding themselves first before they give to others, so that there'll be no discrimination on what they want. They know already and what they are looking for, and that sacred bond that will bring them life, that seed that they will create and house and sustain for those 9 months that we hold our children within our own self. So, you know, that's so important that we have this discussion, and I'm glad Genevieve has reached out today in honor of Women's History Month. We've always had this sacred relationship to this earth, to the air, to the water, and to all of her creation. So I'm going to say miigwech.
Yeah, miigwech. Miigwech for coming out. What role did your family have in shaping you into the woman you are today?
That's important too, because that question allows us to go back and to provide memory, and they say that our blood never forgets, that we have a blood memory, we have a tissue memory, we have a cell memory, we have a DNA code memory, and we know that that sacred water activates that when we have our ceremony, the Mede Wabu, the sacred water that comes to us as medicine. So my parents became active in finding that that traditional experience that was of my ancestors, and it's a life way more than anything, because you do live in that moment of time where we speak as though tobacco is in our hand at all times, you know, to give us that sacred memory that what we hold in this day is a gift. So they taught us that and role modeled that for us through the American Indian movement, and you know, finding early powwows, because they originally were pageants, you know, in the 50s and 60s, our people gathered and provided drum song and social dancing for those that were recovering from the boarding school era, and through land loss and medicinal loss. When the land was taken, all of those connections were also severed at that point. And part of that movement, the American Indian movement, was to fan that flame of recovering and rediscovering and picking up those bundles that our ancestors held so dear to their hearts and to their spirits, to their life way. You know, that was their everyday was guided by our 13 grandmother moons. So we are reminded on a daily basis that those grandmothers still work with us, we still hold them accountable for the gifts that they send us every month. And just finding our language, you know, we were able to intrinsically go into some of those teachings and get an even broader idea, or a broader opening of a doorway of what was what they held responsible, those songs that go with every part of our life, daily life activity: hunting, fishing, gathering medicines, putting people out on fasts, our young people. And for me, you know, sending the most poignant part of my life was sending my own mother on her final ceremony, and being able to sit with her and gather strength from what she was role modeling us to at that time, which was to always be strong, young Guamazan, to always be determined, never give up. You know, and that's what she showed us, was that amazing strength of Ikwewak, of woman, and what it means to give that that final fast to our Creator, so that her spirit could be birthed into that spirit place. So that was just so determining, and allowing us to see this spectrum of this good life, this good way.
What does it mean to be a strong Anishinaabekwewag to you?
The memories of my grandmother, Kisokweg Gladys Sands, who was a lifelong member of this area, this what we call Wabosho Sepi, the Rabbit River Valley. She grew up in the boarding school and was removed to the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial School in Mount Pleasant. And from there she was taken by train to Haskell, Kansas, where many of our people did travel to from those initial boarding school experiences. She never talked about that part of her life. She never chose to talk about her language loss, but I knew she never lost her language, which was because whenever those old people would gather at those pageants and those early powwows, they were always talking Potawatomi, and they were always laughing, and they were always talking to the plants and to the animals and to the trees. And I remember that vividly, being, 5, 6 years old and identifying with being Potawatomi, and they still use the terminology that was acceptable back then. I remember she said, well, it looks like it's time for you. We're going to make your little squaw dress. And you know how that word is not even depicted anymore. It's like saying other words in our language and our vocabulary that aren't acceptable. But, she said that was some sort of pride that she was going to make our little, my sisters and I, and my brother's little articles that she remembers from her youth that were probably born when she was of ceremonial time, when they would gather for the sturgeon feast and for the, I remember them talking fondly of the huckleberry camps every spring and the blueberry camps, and how they even would, historically, my great-great-grandfather on that side was a, what we call an abandoned white child that was left in the huckleberry field. And he grew up to be a prominent pastor of the Potawatomi. He talked Potawatomi, he made black ash baskets, but some of his relatives in this time still carry the blazing blue eyes of a Scottish or an Irish baby that must have been abandoned, that my Indian people, my Potawatomi people found and took in. Like, we would take in a puppy or a cat or an abandoned bear cub or anything, and he was raised to be Potawatomi, and his name was Sam Pigeon. And even my aunt Alice had those striking eyes that, denoted that there was some insertion of white blood in her family, in that family line. So, all of these things that were coming together at that time, the babies, that were taken, but also us finding, non-native babies and bringing them into our families to raise. It was definitely turbulent, but that all, is part of who we are now, that how we gathered the strength of the storms to be here in this time, in this place, in this building, to say who we are culturally, spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally. So I credit all of those ones that hid in the forest of Allegan and still kept their ways.
What are some teachings about womanhood that you have that you would like to see other Anishinaabekwewag do and have?
Okay. One of our most beautiful teachings that we are responsible for is known as the water ceremony. And that ceremony actually teaches us our responsibility for the water and for the water that we hold inside of ourselves that create life and sustain life. And we learn about that teaching of being a vessel, a sacred vessel, and we should only pour pure sacred water into this vessel to make, it a viable place for life. So just learning that, we learn about responsibility and caring for ourselves. We learn about, like if we were outside at the ceremony and a big thunderstorm would come, we would learn to protect that space, shelter it and take care of it. And all of those things identify us with taking care of our own children. That water teaching teaches us, and through time and through repetition, that we are responsible for our children. And it will make us be good mothers and good role models because we've already understood that basic element, that life force of Nabi, our sacred water. And then as we transition to young people, we use the medicine wheel, which we've learned isn't really indigenous to our people, but a lot of people have adopted it and made use of it and found that it does still carry good medicine, it still carries good teachings. In the 4 directions, it's still acknowledged that those directions, those original directions, are intact with that medicine wheel. So as a young person, we would caution them about that southern doorway, you know, that turn that we make before we become mature adults, because they're in the teachings of the 7 grandfathers, which they also learn, you know, in a berry fast or in a vision. We learn about those 7 teachings, you know, just basic moral compass that we follow throughout this place. They tell us that the leaf carries that road, carries those trails, and carries those identifiers, and that we can use that tree nation to teach us about life and how we should always try to stay on that main path, that main Bimadza. So those things come into play when we teach our young people this, you know, expressly, like when they're fasting, to petition to that doorway in the south, Ziguan, Wabanung, Jawanung. That direction carries a responsibility, and one of the road teachings is Akadewin, or bravery. And so they learn about that road, and we teach the young people that it's, you know, to be true and to be brave, but there's a fine line that you can cross with Akadewin, which you can cross, and you cross that line, you cross into foolishness, which is the opposite of bravery. And that's where our young people slide into those decision makings, that they're fooling with their life, they're taking unnecessary risks with their life by not upholding the true teaching of Akadewin. So, you know, that's an important point that we make for our young ones that are experiencing, you know, this comeback into their culture, this comeback into their spirituality. And we try to teach them, then try to identify that for them, so that they have a seed planted in their mind that, okay, maybe what they said is, I should try to balance out myself a little bit more. But all of those teachings do have an opposite spirit, you know, an opposite teacher. And because there was no word for evil or hell in our beautiful language, our beautiful Anishinaabe Woman language, they've identified those ones as the opposite of those. So we call those opposite spirits, and they say they're always present. They're present, and I've seen recorded scroll teachings that identified that marking that identifies an opposite spirit. And they say it lives very close under the stars on this sky realm. And that's why it's always present, and that it can drop right here on your shoulder in a moment's time, and that's how fast you have to make that decision. So we know they're always present. We acknowledge them as being present, because in a lifetime journey, if you don't make mistakes, you don't learn. So we're giving a human person who has been given the gift of choice to choose, because that's a gift that was only given to the human population. Because animals, birds, insects, fish, they all follow their original intention. What Creator gave them instructions to do, they still follow. We were given that extra gift to make a choice. And that's what we try to tell the young people as well, that, you know, you have to choose. And when those things become apparent, it's your own responsibility, your own mind, your own heart that makes that decision. Nobody else does that for you. So, you know, we have those teachings available that, you know, if you were to go into our dance circles, these bandolier bags are making a huge resurgence, and a lot of our beadwork artists are putting their stories into these bags, and you could put your story into a bag just from what I told you on these teachings. You know, you could put that old dame in there representing your first berry fast. Or you could put a lightning strike in there, recognizing that during the time that you sat with our Mother Earth, a thunderstorm came. You could put that leaf there that you were always looking at for those 4 days, you know, and figuring out that road of life. You could put that on there to remind you not to go too far down the road of, you know, greed or love, you know, because those things become toxic as well. So, you know, that's a wonderful thing to see those imprints, those impressions now, because, you know, truly the people are being healed by those abilities to create and make our stories again.
Yeah, the bandolier bags coming back has been really beautiful.
And, you know, even for beadwork artists, we don't have to have beads. There's still skilled fabric artists that can come in and instruct us and at least get that design down, that pattern, or that beautiful flower that you may have had in your mind with a sunset scheme. It's important to get your colors, you know, because you're only given those a few times to capture. And, you know, it's important that you can do that. So just start out by, you know, doing a fabric one, and then, you know, maybe edge it in beads, and then you're getting an idea of how much work goes into these beautiful bags that we carry.
Is there any other knowledge or teachings that you would like to share at this time for future generations?
Well, I would just encourage everybody to get to Maple Sugar Camp. That's extraordinarily important, and it's extraordinarily important that our nation, our tribe, does this for the people and for the trees, because it's giving that relationship. It's providing that that beautiful moment in time where we can, as a community, acknowledge those trees that gave us that medicine and still continue to do so. These tree tapping ceremonies, sweetwater ceremonies, maple sugar ceremonies are happening all across the Great Lakes as we speak, or they're getting ready to. And they tell us that this is our new year, and this is the time when we become alive. So when you tap your tree, you can put your sema down, put your tobacco down, and get your copper cup and just take some of that water first. And then tell yourself, you know, this is going to make us ready. This is going to make me ready to get this good medicine out to our people. And just in closing, I'd like to share that you know, I had some old texts of Medewan ceremonies that was probably written in the early 1900s. And it talked about how the communities prepared the sugar cakes. And when they had the spring ceremony, the first sugar went to those Medewan grandfather drums before anybody else that was made for. They went to those grandfathers first. And I thought that was so beautiful, because I imagined all these beautiful maple sugar candy trays that were filled with the medicine, and then allowing the community to feed these to these important part of who we are, you know, the heartbeat, you know, that's who we are when we look at that.
That's
that
where it begins.
Beautiful gift, where it begins, yes. So, you know, maybe someday we can have a grandfather present with our people, and our young people can go and share in that that beautiful gift for our community.
I love that. Miigwech.
Miigwech. Miigwech. Awesome.